Okay, I just opened it. Where did they go? Oh, they must. Oh, I know what it is. They're in the waiting room. They have to click the button to enter.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Ask Me Anything. And I see folks are coming in now. So welcome. If you would like to put in the chats who you are and where you're from, we would love to see that as well. And welcome. So we will get started in about 30 seconds, 1 minute. Give folks time to hop on here. We do appreciate you coming on and welcome. So please put in the chat who you are and where you're from. We'd love to see that. All right. Got folks coming on. Right. Welcome, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started with our webinar. I'm so excited about today and our speaker and our topic. I can't wait to hear more about all of this, and so glad all of you are here. And please feel free to put anything about who you are, where you're from in the chat, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Well, welcome everybody. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's Ask Me Anything AMA about S.I.L.V.E.R. And just a reminder about what S.I.L.V.E.R stands for. It stands for Supporting Individuals to Live as Vibrant Elders in Recovery. My name is Lisa Kristanak, and I'll be your moderator today. I'd also like to thank Amanda Lowe, who is providing our tech supports behind the scene, and hopefully we won't have it to need her services much today. But today's AMA is made possible through funding from the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. Unlike a traditional webinar, this session is designed to be an open, interactive question and answer conversation. So for the next hour, you'll have the chance to ask questions about today's topic. And our topic today is compassion, resilience, and self-care for caregivers and staff supporting older adults living with mental health challenges. We hope you'll leave today feeling encouraged, recharged, and connected. I am truly honored to introduce our guest expert today, Dr. Laura Leone. Laura is a national recognized leader in the behavioral health and integrated care and currently serves as a lead consultant for the National Council for Mental Well-Being. She brings over 25 years of experience supporting people across the lifespan, from children and adolescents to older adults, in a variety of clinical and organizational settings. Her expertise includes a lot, such as bi-directional integration, evidence-based practices, trauma-informed and resilience-oriented care, equity-focused approaches, suicide prevention, workforce development, and system improvement efforts nationwide. Laura holds a doctorate in social work from the University of Southern California, a Master of Science in Social Work from Columbia University, and is a licensed social worker in New York State. Laura, we are so excited to have you with us today. I'll hand it over to you now, and once you've shared your insights, your knowledge, and your heart, I'll help facilitate any questions from our audience. I know that you're going to kind of manage that yourself, but I'll also be behind the scenes helping out with those as well. So audience, please feel free to start adding your questions to the chat at any time during Laura's presentation now during or afterwards. So thank you so much. We're incredibly fortunate to have her here with us today. As you heard in her bio, how knowledgeable, but one of the things I know about Laura that I've gotten to work with her closely on some things, is she has a huge heart. And that's what I was drawn. And that's why I wanted to have her on today. I've had her on before, and hopefully we'll have her on more times. But you'll see today in her presentation that there's so much behind her knowledge, but also her heart. So welcome, Laura. Please come on and get us started.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for that just lovely and warm welcome and introduction. I really truly appreciate it. And I love being here with all of you. I love working and connecting with Lisa and Amanda, who's on with us as well. And so thank you for your time and attention for joining us today for this Ask Me Anything. And just a little bit of a side note, I come to you today from Plymouth, Massachusetts. So I didn't put it in the chat, but I'll tell you that yes, I'm licensed in New York State where I used to live, and come to you from my home in Plymouth. So let's talk about when the helpers need help. That is really what we're here to explore, right? To think about what do we need to do as caregivers? What do we need to do as staff or as coworkers and colleagues of other staff when we're recognizing that things are not maybe going as well, or we're really feeling stressed out or burnt out? There's lots of things that really happen from concerns about our day to day, concerns about how we're caring for loved ones and caring for people with older adults with mental health challenges and or other behavioral health challenges. Really thinking about just all the things that come into play. And what ends up happening is that we end up potentially getting caught up in any one of these concerns that we see here on the screen. Today's focus will really be on sort of the latter two, but some of the concerns can be that caregivers and the workforce, right, staff, can sometimes get secondary traumatic stress from the work and the caring that they do, right? Which is really about how we end up hearing when we're hearing of other people's trauma. We might get symptoms that are closely connected to post-traumatic stress disorder from hearing of others' experiences. It's sort of that indirect trauma exposure. And sometimes we don't think about it as maybe trauma, but we might think about it as other people's chronic stress, other people's adversities. People also are at risk for vicarious trauma, long-term exposure, again, to cases where people are experiencing traumatic events or have in their past or adverse events. And in vicarious trauma, what tends to happen is there are sort of worldview changes and shifts. We start to kind of think and interact in the world in a different way. There is sort of a cognitive or thinking kind of shifts as well as emotional shifts that we may have. The next two are a little bit more common though. And that is we are all at any point at risk for burnout. And this is when we're undergoing chronic stress. This often happens in the workplace, but it can happen at home as well. Like again, when we as caregivers we've got tasks to do. Part of our task is caring for our loved ones, or maybe other family, other friends, or individuals in our life. And again, of course, this can happen as connected to our work when we're working and caring for others, older adults. And with this comes exhaustion. There may be cynicism. Often there can be actually reduced professional efficacy. So we start to not do such a great job and think about or even do our job to our fullest. You can see absenteeism and presenteeism. And presenteeism is sort of like you're there, but you're not really there, doing it all. And then there's workload and environmental kind of negative interactions that can come up. The last that I'll talk about is compassion fatigue. And this again occurs with exposure to others' suffering, others' stress. This, for us, this turns into exhaustion and sometimes a reduced empathy, right? We start to not feel as compassionate or empathic. Um, for me, I know when I start to like get frustrated a little bit more easily with particular people in my life, whether personally or professionally, it's a good warning sign to kind of check in and say, I maybe am I a little burnt out, or am I going through a little bit of compassion fatigue here? What's happening? It ultimately happens because of that emotional toll of caring. When we, as helpers, all of us, um, we're in the business of caring, and sometimes we can care so much without finding ways to help and take care of ourselves in that process. And what ends up happening is there's a profound emotional and physical wearing down that happens, right? When we're unable to rest and refuel, which is what we're going to talk about today. And, I mentioned sort of one of the warning signs for me is when I'm starting to get frustrated with others. Like there's so many different warning signs here, right? So thinking about what our own kind of stress responses are when we are working and caring for others, and it is starting to wear on us in a variety of different ways. We may start to think the worst of every situation, right? We might start to react differently or disproportionately to the situation. Maybe when we find ourselves never taking a vacation, another, being that some of you on the East Coast are at your lunch hour, like, are you the person who's not ever really sitting down at a table to take your lunch? It's always on the go if you're lucky, or it's at your desk, or you squeeze it in, or you find yourself not even getting to lunch because you're so busy caring for your older adult in your life. Um, Decreased performance at work. We're seeing constantly not getting enough sleep or quality sleep. So sometimes we don't sleep enough. Sometimes we keep waking up and so on. Increased arguments with not only family, but others, a decreased social life. And there's all sorts of stressors related to this, just like I mentioned, right? Repeatedly hearing other people's stress, or an adversity or traumatic event, or just the worries that can come up for people related to their mental health challenges. How when we're constantly, if we're working with people who might reject the help from us, that wears on us. If we are feeling overwhelmed by the sadness of others or feeling helpless in helping to alleviate the pain of others, ultimately that turns into compassion fatigue and can wane and wear and become burnout. When we're working long hours, and if we have our own personal experiences with trauma and stress, it only just kind of doubles it all. So we need to find ways to replenish and think about compassion resiliency. So this is sort of the opposite of compassion fatigue and burnout is compassion resiliency. And we all have the opportunity and capacity for resilience and self-care. And I love this image, right, of like the water pitcher filling up a glass. We are the pitcher. And I really, again, being from Massachusetts, I really have to pronounce my R's there. So pitcher, as opposed to what my parents say, which is pitcha. When we are that pitcher of water, we're filled and we pour ourselves out and we pour ourselves out as caregivers, as coworkers, as colleagues, as staff. We pour ourselves out. If we don't go to the well and replenish, if we don't find a way to refill ourselves, we are going to be empty. And then we can't help and fill other people's glasses. Right. And I'm sure you've heard analogies like this before. It's kind of like, when you're flying on a plane and they say, please put the oxygen mask on yourselves before on the other person. Right. If you can't breathe and you pass out, you're no good to anyone else around you. So it's sort of that same concept of really thinking about how do we help ourselves and build resiliency. So, compassion resilience, a formal definition here is that there's the ability to maintain our physical, emotional, and mental well-being while responding compassionately to people who are suffering. And we don't even have to think about it as suffering. Like that's part of this definition that comes from the Compassion Resilience Toolkit. I don't think that people are always suffering. I think sometimes, people have various experiences. But remembering to know that first part of that statement, right, is really about how we maintain and honor and replenish our own physical, emotional, and mental well-being. Resilience is essentially our ability to adapt when faced with adversity or significant amounts of stress and return to our equilibrium or return to our baseline. And everyone has resilience. Everyone has the capacity to build and grow and develop resilience. And resilience within ourselves is sort of infinite, which is awesome. So there's always opportunities to kind of think about and grow and build that. We have, many different ways that we do that, and we can think about resilience as a way of wellness. And when we think about organizational resiliency, what comes to mind is thinking about how we can be trauma informed and knowledgeable and compassionate, really thinking about embodying the different principles of being trauma informed, which I will not go into today, but something to just keep in mind, right? And really thinking about how do we create that culture of compassion in and among an organization. There is an organization, sort of a systems responsibility there, as well as then kind of funneling it down to a team responsibility when we think about work. And when we think about team at work, right? So are we receiving really good quality supervision, or have meetings where we check in with one another and ensure that we are getting what we need and have our questions answered and can really help each other and have that support and care that you see here. We know that insufficient support from supervision and colleagues really at the organization as a whole ends up suffering. If there are unsatisfactory working conditions, such as workload, pace, or issues with our hours, that's a concern. If we don't feel like we're connected and aligned to our own morals, values, and beliefs within the work that we're doing, sort of moral injury is what ends up happening, and that can cause us to really lean in and get into compassion fatigue and burnout. So these are important pieces to do with organizational wellness and team wellness. But we have a different kind of team when we are caregivers, right? Our team, our personal team, might be other loved ones, might be friends, right? Other maybe professionals that we're personally connected to, when as a team we're together as part of the efforts of caring for the older adults with mental health challenges that's in our life. So really thinking about, there's lots of different opportunities here with this kind of support. And then it all funnels down to what we can do on an individual level as well. It's not just one of these aspects. It really truly is sort of all of these aspects. When we think about personally from a systems or organizational point of view, you know, that team level, and then of course individually, how are we ensuring that we are really getting taken care of and that we're caring for ourselves? I have on here the sort of call out of the 8 dimensions of wellness, which is related to our emotional wellness and all the different aspects: emotional, financial, social, spiritual, occupational, physical, intellectual, and environmental, right? Those 8 areas, we've got to make sure we're getting taken care of in that. We might not be great in all 8 at all the same time. So it takes a little maneuvering, a little balancing, but it can be done. So I talked about resiliency, that it can be learned and grown. We can foster this. And it comes down to many of the things that you see here on this screen. Being able to really think about emotional regulation, which is really our ability to control our emotions, our attention, and thus then our behavior. learning and thinking about impulse control and our ability to manage expression of our feelings, accurate identification of the cause of adversity, really thinking about self-efficacy as like that sense of that we can solve problems and succeed at it. Then there's realistic optimism. So yes, we want to be positive about the future and also realistic about it. So not that sort of toxic positivity that sometimes people get. It's more like cheerleading. It's not that, right? Like, but it is about like how can we be hopeful while learning and recognizing what we have to do in that process. Building out our empathy, right? That ability to read others' behavior, to understand their states, to build relationships, and then reaching out, which is huge and important. And I think again, as caregivers, as staff, we're not great at this, but really thinking about how we continue to drive, how we connect with others for ourselves, is important. Reaching out is also about how we might also take on different kinds of challenges and different kind of opportunities as well. But what I love about sharing this is that sometimes when we talk about compassion, resilience, and self-care, people kind of sometimes think about like, oh, mimosas and days at the spa, which both things sound lovely to me and can be self-care for sure. But it's also about these other things, right? Like, how are you at your emotional regulation? How are you at your impulse control? Are you more of a pessimist or an optimist? Is there that realistic optimism that's happening? There's so much more that comes into it, and really thinking about, what are our specific personal and professional strategies? So, are you in an environment that supports well-being? Do you practice good boundaries and whatever good boundaries mean? Do you have a reliable support system? Do you have access to safe and stable housing and other basic needs? Are they being met for yourself? Because again, if your needs are not being met, if your reservoir is not replenished, you cannot then help others. You will be empty. Timely and appropriate care for yourself, healthy behaviors, sleeping and sleeping well, eating nutritious foods, getting exercise, using positive coping mechanisms versus negative ones, all of that, and I really encourage you to think about for yourselves if you haven't done this, but like think about like what are some like a list that you can make for yourself. Go through and make an inventory of all your sort of things that you do and in your life, and then what is it that you're doing to help yourself to replenish? How are there opportunities to make shifts in time management? Are there opportunities to make shifts in scheduling? These are also part of building compassion resilience. Do you start the day with a relaxing ritual and sort of transition into that day? Do you end the day with a relaxing ritual? Same kind of thing, transitioning out of that day. Taking daily breaks from technology. Sometimes technology can be a way of self-care, and then sometimes it can be a rabbit hole of harmful information that sucks you in and leaves you feeling depleted. We all kind of have different relationships with social media and technology and different things. So really thinking about what that looks like for you and where you might need to create boundaries or maybe use it more if it's helpful in some way. And then other kinds of more formal sort of stress reduction interventions. And if we have time and people want me to go through any of these, I can. I could walk us through and teach us like what is diaphragmatic breathing, deep breathing, or there's many other breathing techniques like alternate nostril breathing and square breathing and so on. There's visualizations and guided imagery, progressive muscle relaxation, which is another one of my favorites. There's, meditation. There's so many different other ways, everyday ways to relax. And just the last point I'm going to make before I let you get a word in edgewise, is that, there is science real, real biological things happening behind us doing and providing ourselves with self-care and thinking about our compassion resilience. You know, especially like even just if you've ever heard of this before, but like acts of kindness, acts of appreciation, providing gratitude, and having connection, meaningful connections with other people. All of these things can boost chemicals in our brain and body. Hormones, right, which are chemical messengers that are secreted by glands to other organs in the body, get boosted, certain hormones, and then also certain neurotransmitters, which are chemicals released by neurons to other cells. Maybe a little bit more science than you wanted today. I don't know. But, when we connect with others through kindness, gratitude, appreciation, and so on, we actually produce 2 times more DHEA, which stands for dehydroepiandrosterone. I know it's a big mouthful, which is a hormone produced by the body's adrenal gland that's actually responsible for slowing down aging. So, especially when we're thinking about maybe we ourselves are older adults, we're helping older adults. Obviously, anything that I'm sharing with you today, yes, is good for you, the caregiver, good for you, the person as part of the workforce, but also good for the people that we're working with and connected to. So really thinking about, right, like DHEA actually helps slow down the process of aging. And it actually has a really awesome, positive, profound effect on our immune system. There are also, we know that all of these things that I mentioned around connection, kindness, gratitude, they reduce cortisol levels in the body by 23%. Cortisol is our stress hormone. So anytime we are stressed and intensified, it jumps up. It's not good for us. It stays in our blood system. It hurts sort of our long-term health over time. But 23% reduction just from doing. Then there's other things like dopamine and serotonin. These are neurotransmitters that produce feelings of happiness, satisfaction, and well being. And they cause the pleasure and reward centers in our brain to light up. It heals wounds, it calms us down. And dopamine, we can get this from sometimes completing a task, certainly from doing self care activities, some eating food, celebrating little wins. With serotonin, which is known as the mood stabilizer, right? We probably have heard that term in relation sometimes to medications that people are prescribed for depression, for anxiety, for the psychotropic medications. But serotonin is a natural part of our body, and we can get it from meditating, from having sun exposure. Really great for many of us in the country these days, where the sun is beaming on us lately. Walking in nature, we get it from exercising. Kindness, gratitude, appreciation, and connection also stimulates the production of oxytocin, which is a hormone and is known as the love hormone because it promotes social bonding. It gives an immediate calming effect and increases a sense of trust and generosity and can strengthen the immune system. We get boosts of oxytocin. It actually is connected to childbirth, and there's boosts of oxytocin that happen in the process of giving birth. But it's also, we can get boosts from playing with a pet, whether that pet is real or robotic. There's tons. I think I talked once last year about just like the benefits of even animatronic and robotic pets. But, playing with a baby, holding hands, giving a compliment, hugging somebody, hugging yourself. You actually, if you're hugging yourself just like this, as I'm doing this and touching myself, I am giving myself a burst of oxytocin. And there's so much more that you can do. And then the last that I'll mention is endorphins, which we know are the hormones that they act as sort of the brain's natural painkiller and is known as the sort of the painkiller. And it's actually 3 times more effective than morphine. 3 times more. Endorphins, we get this from exercising. We get it from eating dark chocolate. We get some essential oils are connected to building of endorphins. And then laughter. laughter is a huge piece to getting endorphins, whether that's watching comedy. There's something called laughter yoga that exists, which is really about how you fake it till you make it by intentionally laughing, even if you don't feel like laughing. And it actually sends those messages to your brain to produce those endorphins and push them out. And then in turn, you start to feel better. So really interesting stuff. I could go on and on and on and clearly have gone well beyond the time that I should. So I'm going to pause and just allow you to get a word in edgewise and say, tell me, what are the questions that you have about building your compassion resiliency or your own self-care? I'd love to hear it. And you can put it in the Q&A. I don't see anything in there yet. You can add it to the chat. Oh, I see one in the chat now. Perfect. All right. So the question, is there anything that coworkers can do to help each other with reducing compassion fatigue and burnouts? Yes, I love that. One thing that coworkers can do is they can stop sliming each other. I love saying that. Sliming is the term that refers to when it's sort of the feeling of receiving or witnessing unnecessary, stressful information or content without warning or permission. So literally thinking about like Nickelodeon green slime. It's like sliming somebody. It's when we sort of like dump on somebody else about our days, right? Like when something really stressful happened, or we heard really upsetting content from a particular person that we were working with, and we're just trying to get it off of our chest, right? We're trying to process that, which processing is really great and needed, but it's how we do it that matters. And so when we don't sort of ask for that, give warning and ask for that permission, it generally leaves the person receiving the information feeling as though they now carry the weight of that unnecessary, maybe graphic or traumatic or stressful information. And sliming is contagious. It actually spreads, and with it, like the possibility of, compassion fatigue, as I mentioned, or even that's of secondary trauma, which I talked about, right? The wearing down from emotionally accepting that material. And the reality is that we could be sliming others and others could be sliming us. And so, what we need to do for that is really practice what's called low impact debriefing. And this includes self-awareness, right? So really thinking about, how and what we do, and, asking for, do you need to be mindful and ask yourself, like, what do you need in the moment? Are you looking for support? Are you looking for validation or something else? Excuse me. So if we are in the habit of sliming others, right, instead of doing that, the first step is try to build that sort of self-awareness before you're going to sort of disclose your information, the tough day, the like venting that you want to do. Again, ask yourself, look, are you looking for support? Are you looking for validation or something else that's kind of coming in mind? Then give fair warning. So give a little small warning that like something negative is to come, right? Like, oh, hey, do you have a moment, Lisa? I want to tell you about something that happened that was shared with me today that really was pretty upsetting, but I just want to let you know, is it okay if is it okay? Are you in an okay spot to like hear that information right now? Right? It allows the person to brace themselves to hear the story. It allows them to say, actually, no, I'm feeling really stressed myself, and I feel like I wouldn't be able to handle or receive that information great right now. Right? It just gives an opportunity, because ultimately, then the third part is really getting that consent, right? Once you have provided warning about the content, ask if it's okay that you can share that information, and wait to see if the person says yes or not. Being able to do that. And then sort of the last part of it is limited disclosure. So decide how much of the story or how much of the information or the day you are going to share, and start with the least traumatic information and material and increase slowly, allowing for opportunity for the listener to give indication that they maybe they're getting too much information, or you know what is the minimum amount that you can express that's going to allow you to share what you need to share while also helping and protecting your coworkers or colleagues. And I would say that this can even apply again to in our personal lives and caregivers as well. But it tends to come up and is much more frequently needed in the workplace setting when we are again working with older adults with mental health or even substance use challenges or other health challenges. Um, there's opportunity on the flip side, right? Like if you're the person getting slimed, you also want to really think about your own ownership and agency, of how you can communicate, if you aren't able to continue the conversation or hear the information right now, right? So really thinking about from both parties, so that we're avoiding that sort of sliming experience. And that, yeah. And other question. Okay, what is a boundary and what are examples of good boundaries? Oh, right. So I mentioned that earlier. Um, so a boundary is anything that we do. It can be a physical boundary. It can be an emotional boundary. It's sort of a limit to do or not do certain behaviors. And so this might be saying yes more to certain things. Maybe it's saying no more to certain things, right? It's about how we can be proactive and allow ourselves some structure to offer, excuse me, safety, for ourselves and for others. And safety is not always just physical safety. There's emotional or psychological safety. There's moral safety, intellectual safety, and so on, social safety. So we don't want people to sort of have to guess or guess what we need or want, right? It's about being as upfront and articulate as possible when, for example, when I was just talking about sliming, we may have to set a boundary to say, you know, to our coworker, and Lisa, I'm just going to keep using your name. Like, let's say Lisa has been repeatedly sort of sliming me. I might have to like have a conversation with Lisa and say, hey, Lisa, like I noticed lately you've been having a lot of tough situations and I'm really sorry and I want to really be there for you. But what I'm realizing is for myself, I'm getting really activated or upset after hearing your struggles, and I'm recognizing that I might need a little less information from you or a little bit of warning from you if we're going to have that kind of conversation going forward. And then I've set a boundary. So boundaries are, they're sort of can be agreements between people about certain situations and examples. And then if something happens and it's sort of violated or, or not kind of adhered to, right, try to discuss that in the moment and not wait days, weeks, months later, so that you can correct it in a kind way and it's helpful for you and the other people. Excuse me. Those are some examples. Yeah. Sometimes, and I'll share one other thing, which is sometimes we have to keep our own sort of boundaries, right? So are you the type of person who like do you start your day at a certain time? Do you end your day at a certain time? Or do you keep checking emails? Like sometimes our roles and responsibilities don't allow us to have a certain start and stop. So where are the places where you can find those boundaries? Like I receive work emails and information to my phone, but I have to go and actively check it. It doesn't automatically come up as like sort of a pop-up or a notification, so that I have to be in the right headspace and actively check it when I want to check it versus having it always like kind of coming up. And that's a boundary I've set for myself. Or I use Teams, Microsoft Teams at work, but I don't have that on my phone and I don't access it outside of when I'm not sort of at my desk or at my computer where it's located. Those are just some other examples that have come up. Other questions here. So self-compassion related to compassion resiliency? Yes, it is. Self-compassion is just what it sounds like. It's our compassion that we have for ourselves. It's about how we care for ourselves. So when we think about how we have compassion for others, and so many times we have so much compassion and empathy for others, right? We're all helpers, we do that, but we don't always allow ourselves that same compassion. Um, Kristen Neff, she has done a lot of work around compassion, self-compassion, and I'll go ahead and I'll type her name in the chat so people can have it if you want to look her up. But Kristen Neff, um, she talks about a ton of this, right? Like about this is really self-compassion are like skills that can be developed and honed, and include self-kindness. So, right, we're going to be understanding of ourselves and not punishing ourselves, not saying those negative things or putting ourselves down. Part of it is us having a sense of common humanity, right? Like understanding everybody goes through this. We are all fallible. We all make mistakes. Giving ourselves grace the same way that we would give another person grace. And then the third area is around mindfulness, which is around like we're not going to ignore, nor are we going to exaggerate feelings, our feelings, or just like situations where maybe we feel like we failed or we didn't achieve what we wanted to achieve. That we're going to sort of practice mindfulness and in the state of like we're going to acknowledge that it happened, acknowledge that it's there, but we don't have to qualify it as awful and the worst thing ever and bad and exaggerate it, nor are we going to push it aside and not think about it or ignore it, right? Like, so really staying in that space. So yes, self-compassion is huge, and I would say it's an area again where we constantly have great compassion for others before and beyond what we end up doing for ourselves. And any other ideas? So I'm looking in the chat. Any other ideas for how to build up our compassion and stay strong while supporting others? Great question. Yes. So there's a few different things that I can think of. One is how do we learn and practice de-escalation techniques, right? When someone, when ourselves, when we are escalated, or when someone else is escalated, maybe they're aggravated, maybe they're upset, maybe they're getting worked up, maybe they have been triggered or activated, and again we ourselves have been, these are good moments where we could be ultimately we want to learn techniques and then practice those, and to get good at doing them in the moment means we kind of have to practice them elsewhere when we aren't activated or when somebody else isn't activated, right? Is learning and figuring out ways of doing things like how do we have very purposeful and thoughtful interactions? How do we use a person first language, meaning we're not going to talk to somebody about them, right? It's, we're going to talk to them and be clear and direct. We're going to use language that is simple, everyday terms, not jargon. We are going to, if I were having a conversation with Lisa about a client that I work with, in front of that client, I'm going to use that client's name. I'm not going to say like the client over here to Lisa, right? Like as an example. So really thinking about how we use person first language. We want to focus on relationship building and how do we engage and build connections we say this often, especially in relation to being trauma informed, that healing happens in relationships. When we can connect with people, and there's all sorts of different kinds of relationships that we have, but when we connect, something happens there, right? We engage and um, there is more of a buy-in to continue to have conversation, to work together, to try to figure something out. And so we want to find ways of engaging and connecting. And that doesn't have to happen over a long period of time. We can do that in a very short, succinct way. The more you do it, the more you work on it, the better you'll get at it. This is certainly something I always say to sort of people that are newer, especially working in the field of, overall healthcare and well-being, is that, it might feel like it's more something you have to work at the beginning, but it pays off to keep working at it, and then it will get quicker and easier. And I think the more authentic and genuine we can be, also the better, right? That there's transparency in that when we are upfront, when we are clear. Um, Being clear is kind, being unclear is unkind. I think Brene Brown said that, and it's again very common adage that people kind of say. I think related to de-escalation techniques is that self-awareness, that we kind of talked about with sliming, same kind of thing. And how do we promote consistency and predictability? So if we are working in and among others who are going to be escalated and activated, like having set structure, having set guidelines for how we're going to do things and when we're going to do things, and staying and sticking to that to the best of our ability helps the other person know what to expect and to regulate back when they have been de-escalated. So that is another area that's important, as well as recognizing areas of strength. We're kind of in the business of problems and problem solving, which is fine, but it's really also so important to recognize people's strengths, skills, and abilities, their efforts, and matching not only problems with honoring strength, skills, and ability really shows that we are very intricate, different people that are not just our problems. And it honors and acknowledges efforts and opportunities of ways that we can learn from our strengths and apply that elsewhere. Certainly, we want to avoid any sort of punitive language or actions or any sort of exclusionary practices, and just really fostering a safe space. And then when we're sort of like responding to escalated behavior, for us, like staying calm to focus on that de-escalation process and to manage our own responses is important. Really thinking about how we can be empathetic, and try to ignore minor challenging behaviors, which can be so hard to do, especially certain things might feel so personal. But so many times when people are escalated in and among us, it's not really about us, even if the words that they're coming out of their mouth are about us. It's usually about something else or something more that is happening for that individual. A lot of what I'm talking about really leans into, again, being trauma informed, and what sort of that can entail and understand. But with it, I think is an understanding that compassion resiliency is being trauma informed. So how do we also be non-threatening, right? And how we stand, what if we're in person with somebody, like I might not stand face to face. I might turn my body at an angle so that it's less of a confrontation. I'm going to have my hands down maybe by my side. I'm going to try not to wave them around too much. I'm also not going to cross them, because crossing them, even if it's comfortable to sit this way, it like creates literally a physical barrier, a visual barrier that somebody can see, and it's sending the message that you're closed off. Even if that's not what you're intending, it sort of might be an accidental consequence of standing that way. So keeping your arms open, your arms ideally by your side. So really thinking about, and that's for me, that's hard to do. I talk with my hands all the time. So where I'm in situations of escalation, I have to really think and be mindful of what I do with my own hands waving around. And really thinking about how do we identify a purpose to those interactions, and respect personal space. And of course, safety and setting safety limits, and safety has to be first and foremost, and all the different kinds of safety, as I mentioned before. But, we may, if we are in unsafe situations, we may have to call for help, ask for help. Maybe that's, a loved one that's nearby. Maybe that's again, for a coworker, maybe it's a crisis, or at home, even like calling 911 or a crisis team. If we're a coworker, it might be calling coworkers, or maybe there's certain staff or security or so on. Yes. Um, yeah. So I'll pause there too and just see like any other any other questions or thoughts that people have.
Laura, as we wait to see if others put some things in the chat, I want to thank folks um, for being here today and hanging in there. And I know I was hanging in there because you said a statement about focusing on, I wrote it down, focus on creating a safe space. And it made me think about in my own, my own life, whether it's work or personal. I'm a caregiving person myself. I'm just a helper by nature in every position I've ever had, right? And I always, when I heard that, I generally think about how to create that safe place for the person I'm supporting, but not so much about for myself.
Yeah.
So what do I need to feel safe in my environment? And you touched on so many of those things that I think a lot of us we've either had experiences or we've heard of them, things happening in that workplace when we're in those caregiving roles that it's not so safe, and how to handle those. And I appreciate that. But I just wanted to say that for me, when I learned about boundaries, it felt yucky, like I felt like I was putting up a wall, but
Mhm.
indeed it's the opposite. It's actually love, not not just for the people that we support, but for ourselves. And because of that, to me, boundaries is just like the top priority for self-care, like being able to do that. And it's something I had to practice. It did not come natural for me, and I still
Mhm.
struggle with it.
Yeah, some people really struggle with even just like the feeling of assertiveness around that, right? Like especially if you're more of either a timid or less outspoken person, or more like passive, right? Like sometimes that feels too much, and sometimes people overshoot it and almost feel like they get aggressive, you know, for lack of a better term, in how they set those boundaries. But that's part of the sort of learning and the practicing of that. And so if you think about passivity is over here and aggressiveness is over here and assertiveness is in the middle, yes, sometimes people will overshoot a little bit and then they'll backtrack into the middle. So, um, and so yeah, it's not always going to feel comfortable right away, but it is what you're doing is not only taking care of yourself, but when you're setting a boundary and being clear about that and being upfront about that in a kind way, you are being kind to the other person. You're letting them know like what your needs are and sort of what your rules of the interaction or conversation, or expectations are. So that everyone can kind of work accordingly, and you don't have to be mean about it, in that process. So I appreciate that. And Lisa, thank you for sharing what you shared about just like how do you take care of yourself. And as you were talking about what's something I said, I was thinking about, when I was saying like having transitions like to the start of our day or to the end of the day. It doesn't have to be like we wake up and we sort of do something for ourselves good. It could be like on your way to work, whether you're on your way to work is driving from point A to B, or whether it's walking down the hall from like the bedroom or the bathroom to the office. Like, are there certain rituals or routines that you can do to set yourself up to be in a good headspace or a good mind space to start your day and to be refreshed or replenished? And maybe it's not walking to your office, maybe it's walking to somebody else's bedroom to check on them, right? Like, do you maybe do like a quick deep breathing activity? Do you remind yourselves of like certain personal mantras? Like, there's so many different ways. And then on the way finishing up the day, or transitioning maybe from our professional life to personal life or some other transition, like what are some things we can do there? Again, deep breathing. I used to, like, when I was driving from point A to point B, I would listen to a certain type of music, and I would like sort of blast that in the car and kind of just, it was one of my transitional things that I would do. Now I tend to, I talked about like technology and social media as being good or bad, like it, helpful or unhelpful for me. Now I actually find I have trained my Instagram algorithm really well. So it knows the stuff that I really like, and it sends me only fun, good, positive content, which is great. And sidebar, there's like ways that you can retrain your algorithm, and you can look that up and Google it and or YouTube it. But I go on at the end of my day, I go onto Instagram for a little bit, and I just like look at fun stuff and laugh at comedic things, and it's perfect. So, and that's now one of my transitional things that I do. So, yeah, lots of good stuff. And I want to keep talking so much more, but I'm realizing we are like really at the close to the end of
Yeah.
time. And I know, Lisa, you want to wrap us up. And so I just want to also just thank everyone for your time and attention today, and for your great questions, and for joining. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm again at the National Council for Mental Wellbeing, and my email there is laurel@thenationalcouncil.org. If you have any questions about today's content or anything else, please do not hesitate to reach out. And Lisa, thank you so much to you, and Amanda, your support today. Lisa, I'll turn it back over to you.
Hey, thank you, Laura. You're great. I loved it. I love these conversations, and I've heard so many of this stuff before, and many of us have, but we forget. And
Mhm.
my wheels are turning about my own inner things that I need to work on. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I just want to let everybody know that Amanda will be putting in the chat, if she already hasn't, a copy of the slides today. So you can review them. You'll also have Laura's email address, her information. Yep, she just put it up there. So you can grab that before you head out. So you'll have those. And any questions that you have that you want to send to Laura privately, maybe something came up for you that you didn't really want to put in the chat. Laura will definitely correspond with you, but she is the expert on all of this, and I know she'll be very helpful. But thank you, Laura, for coming on. Guys, when you sign off, there will be a little a minute survey. Please take a moment to fill it out. It is very helpful for us as we continue this work with our AMAs, and for our funding. We surely appreciate it. And but thank you so much for coming on and spending this wonderful hour with us. And Laura, thank you too. And hopefully we'll see you at the next AMA.